Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, it is starting to feel like we covered the Tennessee Volunteers. I've watched more Tennessee football than any other team in the nation at this point, other than Ohio State and Michigan, who are the two teams that we watch a lot for our actual beat reporting jobs. I'm heaven help me, Tony. I'm starting to like Rocky Top. I'm not cool with this, but I'm kind of like, it is kind of catchy.
Of course it is, Tom. I mean, this is, I told you when we started doing this, you being a city boy, me being a country person, like I am all about Rocky Top and the lineage of the tune and the history and all of the great music that has come from the area. Not modern day Nashville, mind you, but back in the day. So yes, welcome everybody. This is our third iteration of what we've learned from watching a Tennessee football game. As I'm doing this, Tom, I was thinking maybe we should have done these in like chronological order because we're watching this progression and then regression, and it's like, well, we should release these in chronological order. But consider this the prequel to the Georgia game that we just released. I don't know, it gets out of order, but we are talking about Tennessee's loss to Arkansas 1914, if I recall. And boy, I'll let you go first, Tom, because I don't know how this game was so close and how Tennessee was actually leading by 14-3 at one point in this game when Arkansas squandered 3 blown touchdowns in the first half and Tennessee capitalized for a little bit. But this one, again, this was the 5th game of the season for Tennessee. They were 4-0. This was also, I believe, the same weekend that Vanderbilt beat Alabama. So there's all kinds of stuff going on in the SEC. This may have gotten lost in there. And as I'm watching this, Tom, I had forgotten that this was the Nico Iamaleava slide because I watched it live. I was home in time to watch it live, or I was in the post game somewhere watching it live. And I was like, this all looks familiar. And then I saw like the 4th down and the scramble. I'm like, oh no, this is the slide with no time remaining. And then Twitter went crazy. And then we saw something where the Twitter blows up with like, well, you're a redshirt freshman, but still you're a quarterback. How can you let this happen? And then, I don't know, 1 week later, are we in Oregon? 2 weeks later, we're in Oregon and we see a 5th-year senior for Ohio State, Will Howard, doing that. And it's like, well, I guess that's how that happens.
That is how that happens. Yeah. And we'll get to that play at the end. And this is the third one that we've done of these, as you said, and we've gotten some very nice feedback from Tennessee fans. I'm sure the feedback on this one will not be as positive because the game itself was not as positive. We're doing the Vanderbilt game next. Don't worry. We're going to end on a good one for you. If you guys are enjoying this, Tennessee fans, feel free to share this with other Tennessee boards or other Tennessee fans. We are always interested. We read the comments. We're interested in your feedback on stuff. And, I saw someone saying that we're not giving the Tennessee wide receivers enough credit. And, I'm interested to see what things look like at the end of the year with the Vanderbilt game, because I know they put up 40-something points, I think, in that one. So we'll get there. But yeah, if you guys enjoy these, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're going to have plenty of content covering both the Buckeyes and the Vols heading up all the way to the game. And then, of course, we'll be there and have full coverage pre, post game, all that jazz. So, okay, sales pitch over, on to the game. I think, Tony, my first thing is, boy, you start to pick up these trends and everyone goes tempo on Tennessee. Everyone. First down, or first drive of the game, Arkansas goes tempo, boom, 3rd and long, tempo. They catch Tennessee off guard. They convert. They did it later on in the game. And, it was just very consistently, everyone in the SEC feels like, it seems, that if you go tempo on Tennessee, you just kind of catch them. It's not like they're completely caught off guard and you're just torching them. It's just like they're not, there's a lot of movement on the line, a lot of shifting, a lot of communication. And if you go tempo, there was a bunch of times when Arkansas was snapping the ball with 20, 25 seconds left on the play clock. It doesn't have to be, old Oregon Chip Kelly blur tempo where you're snapping it with 32 seconds on the clock. You can take a second, get your play call in, and go. It wasn't all the time. No one runs tempo all the time, but it was enough that, and it was consistently successful enough that I think I'm assuming Ohio State must be watching this and must be thinking, okay, we got to work some of this into the game plan.
When you consider that Ryan Day said they should have run more tempo against Michigan, you would think that they would do the same thing here. Because as we continue to see, it takes the defense a little while to get set. And even like, sure, the defensive line gets set, all 3 or 4 of them, and then there's still a safety or a linebacker still trying to figure out where they're supposed to be or where they want to be. So there are things to take advantage of there. But I also noticed there was a time where I think Tennessee was trying to take advantage of some tempo, and the Arkansas defensive line wasn't set, and the defense wasn't set. But then that meant the Tennessee offensive line didn't know who to block, and it led to like a tackle for loss or a sack. So there is some give and take there when you're trying to do that, because if they're not lined up yet, you don't necessarily know exactly who you're supposed to hit. So you got to be careful there. But yeah, we continue to see it, and it's effective with the tempo against Tennessee. And you pick and choose when you do it. And if you pick right, you're going to do pretty well with it from what we've seen. And in this one, Taylon Green, starting quarterback for Arkansas, 19 of 27, 266 yards, no touchdowns, was sacked once. He got hit on what could have been a complete disaster, a roughing call, hit on the leg, lower leg, knee. He had to come out for the rest of the game, tried to play, and was not the same player. He's a mobile guy that can run around and make some things happen at times. He can at least keep plays alive. And once he got hit, he was pretty much done. Malachi Singleton came in, their backup, and was not very good early on, and then led them to the final drive for a touchdown, as Tennessee let them score at the end. But just overall, the Tennessee defense, the tempo works. I was also, while we're talking about the defense, really impressed again with James Pierce and Jordan Josephs. Is that correct?
I think so.
Those 2 outside edge guys, they're doing a good job against the read option in this one. There were times where there was no good decision for a quarterback to make, or whatever decision he made, you still had Pierce able to defend it. So I was impressed there. They're both really, really athletic. They don't always play together. Sometimes they sub each other. And but both of those guys are athletic and physical, and they did a good job against the run in this one. But I also thought I was surprised at how well Arkansas ran the ball at times, but it was mainly the big kid with Braylon Russell, 62 yards on 8 carries. Overall, Arkansas went for 137 yards on 44 carries, 3.1 yards per carry. They were pretty patient with this one. They ran the ball 44 times, threw it 30. Tom, 74 plays, that's a lot. If Ohio State gets 74 plays in this one, that would mean that they are running tempo, because that's the only way they're going to get there. 2, that would tell me that they're having some success doing it.
Yeah, that's very much a bet the over stat. If Ohio State gets to 74 possession plays, that feels like that's like 10 more than they've gotten in any game this year. And that's one of the things that's really interesting about this game. Before we dive into that, Joshua Josephs, not Jordan Josephs. I'm like, that sounds right, but it doesn't sound right. And those are James Pierce, 11 tackles for loss this year, leading the team. Joshua Josephs, 9, second on the team. So there you go. Definitely 2 names to know. 27 and 19, extremely normal defensive line numbers. All right. So moving back to the tempo, this could be a game that does get played in that range, because the reason Ohio State's gotten held to 50-something plays so many times this year is opponents have been running a very plodding tempo. Tennessee wants to pick up the tempo sometimes too. I think there's a possibility you see more plays in this game, just because both teams might be, you're not putting the pedal through the floor at all times, but if you're doing it sometimes and you're not trying to run the plodding, kill the clock tempo that a lot of the bottom half of the Big Ten tries to run against Ohio State, you're maybe going to have a higher scoring game than you think. And you might have, I feel like all year I take, what do I think the score is going to be? And then I take a touchdown off of it, just because Ohio State's getting basically a drive or more or less than they typically do. This year, this game might be whatever the score is, pick the score. You don't need to sort of adjust it, because it might actually be more of a traditional number of plays, which, I got to tell you, I'm fine with it. I am 100% fine with that, because the choke the life out of the game, it gets a little old after about 12 weeks. So We'll see. Boy, the next note I had, Tony, this is not exactly relevant to this year's game, but I'm still not ready to watch the Clint Sterner fumble. They ran that as a play in the middle, just like it was a bumper during a sponsors of the game kind of thing. But it was just like, oh boy, I think we've told this story on this show before, but you did not go to the Iowa game in 1998. It was the week after Ohio State suffered that shocking loss to Michigan State. I had bought tickets to the Iowa game because it was like, well, it's going to be great. And obviously they're going to be undefeated. And then they lost to Michigan State the week before that. So I'm sitting in the stands at Iowa, and this is the year before Kirk Ferentz took over, and Iowa was terrible. So Ohio State's just kind of clobbering them. And this is pre-cell phone. So the people around me in the stadium are all talking about, the Tennessee game's pretty close. Oh, it looks like Arkansas might be able to. And then something weird happened, and you just heard this groan, and it was like, what is it? Is that good? Please tell me that's good. No, Clint Sterner has just put the ball on the ground for no reason whatsoever. So anyway, welcome our new Tennessee fans who probably enjoyed that more than we did way back when. Let's see. How about...
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
The season opener for Tennessee that year was at Syracuse. Mm-hmm. And we listened to that game in the parking lot of Ohio State's season opener at West Virginia. And that was a 34-33 T. Martin victory for the Vols. That was didn't seem as big then. Turned out to be quite big later on. So congrats to the Vols on their national championship.
I'm not quite ready to say that yet, but that's okay. We'll move on. One thing that I think there was a quote from Andre Turrentine, the safety from Tennessee this week, about the crowd noise at Ohio State, and that he obviously is an Ohio State transfer. And he has played in Ohio Stadium for a season. And the quote was, quote, "The shoe isn't as loud as the SEC. It's a different animal here, whether you're at South Carolina at nighttime or whether you're at Arkansas at nighttime, whether at Neyland at nighttime or the daytime for that matter. It's loud here. It's deafening." I would say the shoe is the same way. They really have diehard fans that are willing to make enough noise to achieve what they need to. So I would say that the SEC is a little bit louder, but the shoe brings it as well. And, I never think of Arkansas as a particularly loud place. It's like, it's not that enormous a stadium. It's not a place where everyone just dreads going to play in the way that you dread going to Tuscaloosa or something. And that has a lot to do with the team that plays in Tuscaloosa. But you don't think of Arkansas as that loud of a place. But boy, the Arkansas crowd impacted the Tennessee offensive line a bunch. There were a bunch of false starts. They had false starts early. John Campbell, the right tackle, seemed like he was having a really bad time. He got called for a face mask at one point, got a call for a hold on the last drive of the first half. Sometimes that can be, you have to look over because you can't hear the crowd. You have to go a silent count. And then the defensive player gets the same jump that you do, so you don't have an advantage as an offensive lineman. That can be part of that. But then there were more false starts right towards the end of the game. Might have been the last drive of the game, but late in the game, they had more false starts. And you just wonder what the crowd noise is going to do at Ohio Stadium. I know there's been lots of conversation about, is this crowd going to be 10% Tennessee fans or 20% Tennessee fans or what? But, even if it's 20%, 25% Tennessee fans, there's still 75, 80,000 Ohio State fans there. And it's going to be finally not a noon game in Columbus. So I'm sure everyone will be excited for that. So, and you've got the atmosphere of the home playoff game and all that kind of stuff. So it feels like that Ohio State crowd could play a pretty significant role in this, because we've seen teams, Indiana struggled with the silent count at times. Ohio State had trouble with the silent count on the road at times. It takes away one of the advantages the offense has. And, you can make it work, but it makes life just a little bit harder, especially on the guys at the end of the offensive line.
Yeah, and that stadium there in Fayetteville holds 75,000, and that's how many were at that game. And maybe the thing that stood out to me most in this one was the Tennessee offensive tackles. They had some struggles, and they had some struggles with the noise, and there were 3 false starts by the Tennessee offensive line. I think left tackle Lance Hurd had a couple. This may have been, with only seeing 3 games of his so far, I think this was his worst game of the season. And he struggled. And you mentioned John Campbell. He had an amazing hold on the play at the end of the second quarter that led to a deep shot that wasn't called. Those 2 guys were just grabbing as much as they could, and they looked like they were a little out of sorts in this one. And they've not been fantastic in the 3 games that we've seen. Haven't necessarily, like Campbell 74, the right tackle, hasn't stood out much, which is a good thing. He stood out more in this one, which is a bad thing. Hurd, I think we've seen pretty much every game to this point in terms of having some issues, having some struggles. And so I think that is an area that we'll see how it looks against Vanderbilt in the season finale, and that'll give us some semblance of an idea. But that was pretty alarming. The first series for Lance Hurd, left tackle, it was not great, and then he had some more issues later in the first half. So I think there are some concerns there. I mentioned against Georgia how their alignment, you could tell that they're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. Now this game happened earlier in the season than the Georgia game, so I don't think it was as pronounced, but there were still times you could see it was they're going to throw the ball. I wonder if it becomes more pronounced throughout the course of the season when the offensive line, not that they're getting lazier, but they're trying to cut some corners, which is not atypical. So your tackles are going to get in their pass sets, you get a little bit deeper off the line of scrimmage. I think they were better in this one, but it's earlier in the season, so why wouldn't it be? The later in the season it gets, maybe it regresses a little bit. So I'll be interested to see how that looks against Vanderbilt. But overall, there were times where they were getting pressure with 4 and 5, and Arkansas didn't really necessarily have to send 6 too often. And I think the broadcast said Arkansas came in with like the lowest number of sacks in the SEC at that point, and they got to Nico Iamaleava 4 times in this one. And again, it's just interesting to see him pressured so much. And there were times where he would kind of run into pressure, but that's because there are also people over here. And so I think if you're looking for, I know we talked about the concerns on the Ohio State offensive line. I'm not convinced there aren't also concerns for Tennessee on the Vols offensive line.
Yeah, and when we're looking at these games, these one-off games, and we're intentionally picking games against the best opposition or games where something really notable happened, whether they just killed a great team or lost to a team that you go, why would you lose to them? How did you possibly lose to them? You get some sort of outlier performances. Mm-hmm. If the offensive line looks like this in Columbus, that's probably not great news, but we've seen them not look like this later in the season against presumably better defensive line. So I'm willing to sort of treat this as an outlier until proven otherwise. I'll be interested to see what the Vanderbilt game looks like. But it is, Iamaleava, you mentioned, that he'll kind of run around and sometimes run into guys. Mm-hmm. He just, every time I watch him, I think he's a young quarterback who has always been the best guy on the field and is still getting used to the fact that he can't necessarily just use his legs or use his arm to just get himself out of trouble. Like I'm trying to think back. This is the 3rd game we've watched. How many times have we seen him throw the ball away? Like intentionally just throw the ball into the 3rd row and live to fight another day? Like once, twice? It feels like he's always trying to extend the play, which is good. And sometimes it works great, but sometimes it leads to taking unnecessary sacks, taking unnecessary hits. Sometimes he's forcing the ball into coverage. He didn't have an interception in this game. He had ones in the earlier games against Alabama and Georgia that was like, oh boy, that was a poor choice. It feels like he has the, extremely talented young quarterback disease of constantly tries to do like just a little bit too much, and it works just often enough that he's like, all right, I can do it again. And sometimes it works, but when it doesn't, that's how you end up giving up 4 sacks to a defense that really wasn't able to sack many other people throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, he finished 16 of 28 passing for 156 yards, a long of 42, which I believe was the pass at the end of the second quarter, which led to at the end of the game rather, which moved them down the field. And then of course sacked 4 times. So again, as I do sometimes, I track the depth of targets, the depth of throws on this one. And in the first half, he only threw 2 passes that were further than 10 yards downfield. He completed 1 of them. And then he threw 10 passes more than 10 yards downfield in the second half. Overall, he completed 3 of his 12 passes more than 10 yards downfield in this one. And you see the 5.6 yards per pass attempt. And we continue, we get some grief and we get some feedback on, maybe we're not giving the respect that is due to the Tennessee wide receivers. And you look at this box score in particular, Squirrel White, 10 targets, 38 yards. He had 10 targets, 7 catches, 38 yards. He's a screen guy. They did hit him. They had him deep once, and Nico missed him, and he missed some deep shots in this one. And that's one where you're going to have to watch out because they threw a lot of screens to him, and the one time they didn't, he was wide open downfield, and it didn't connect. But he had 32 of his 38 yards receiving were after the catch, to give you an idea of where he gets the ball. Long catch of just 10 yards. Chris Brazzell, we've seen him, and it's like 2 catches for 21 yards. Brew McCoy, 2 for 9. Dante Thornton, who averages 25 yards a catch, he had 1 catch in this one, 42 yards. Dylan Sampson, we'll probably get to him, the running back, but Tennessee is one of those wide receiver blue bloods. Like, they've always got wide receivers, and I'm not saying these guys aren't talented. And I think this was the game Squirrel White got hurt, and then maybe for the rest of the season, I think he's kind of been banged up a little. But he was healthy in this one, and this is what you got out of it. I'm not saying that they won't get more out of them against Ohio State, because we have seen the secondary sometimes break down when they are looking to blow up some screens. Against Oregon, they sat at the sticks and just made sure that Oregon didn't get past the sticks, because they were waiting for the pass right there at the first down, and then the receivers just kept running, and then the Ohio State defense was like, well, this was not part of the game plan. So they do still have to be aware of that in this one.
For sure. And I think Tennessee's receivers are probably a lot like, we're going to talk about Dylan Sampson in just a moment because I'm going to talk about him, but it feels like if you can get them down to the ground and you don't miss a tackle, you're not going to probably get hurt too badly. If you miss a tackle, there's plenty of speed out there where it can turn into something much longer. Mm-hmm. Squirrel White, as you said, 10 targets, 7 receptions, 38 yards, 32 yards after catch. So I'll do the math for you. 7 catches, 6 yards before the catch downfield. So that is purely screens. And yeah, you're going to see them presumably try and break some tendencies in this game. When you've got a few weeks to game plan, you've got time to look at your tendencies and break those tendencies. I'm fully expecting more downfield throws to Squirrel White and Brazzell and McCoy. Thornton is, I'm fascinated by the fact that there were 2 throws to him all game. He feels like he's the most dangerous guy they have in the pass game, and two attempts to him. I think he got banged up at one point in this game, but it wasn't right away. He's someone who it just feels like if you're going to take a shot downfield to him, because he seems like he's pretty effective down, in those longer throws. And one thing that's been very consistent in all 3 games we've seen, when Iamaleava misses downfield, he always misses long. He never misses short. It's always 2 yards too long, 3 yards too long. It's never short. The arm is there, and it's like at some point the touch is going to come, and then they're going to be a real dangerous offense. We'll see as we watch some of the later games whether the touch has come at all for him since then. But yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And similarly, Dylan Sampson, I have a note, Arkansas is just consistently able to control the run game without bringing a safety down in the box. And if you can do that, and I'm not sure Ohio State can, but if you can, it really screws with Tennessee's offense. And then that was like late in the first half. And then right after halftime, Tennessee gets into a 3rd and 4, and Arkansas safety takes a bad angle, and then Dylan Sampson goes 53 yards inside the 5. And then I think he scored a touchdown. And then, he had another long run, hit a couple more down in the red zone, where that was the one where they snapped it really quickly and Arkansas wasn't lined up. They went from down 3-0 to up 14-3 in like 5 minutes. And that was the moment where I thought, they did lose this game, right? Because it's like Arkansas spent the entire first half pissing away chances where it's like, this should be 21-0 Arkansas, and it's 3-0 Arkansas. And I've watched this exact football game a bunch of times with different teams, and the team that does that never wins. It always comes back to bite them. And then you see a team do that, and then they give up 2 touchdowns in 5 minutes, and it's like, you should be up 21-0 right now, and so you're down 14-3. Like, you're definitely screwed. And then somehow they came back and won, which is still like, I watched the game and I'm still not sure I completely understand how that happened. But Dylan Stewart, very good. You have to get him to the ground. You cannot miss tackles. He is too good. That's going to have to be, Ohio State has to stop him first. I was also impressed with Deshaun Bishop. We haven't seen much of him this year, at least in the 3 games we've watched. They've had a couple different backup guys in there. Bishop came in. He only had 3 carries, but it was just the first carry, just boom, 13 yards. And just another guy who is going to push the pile, make you miss tackles. There's a lot of talent in that Tennessee running back room that Ohio State needs to be very, very sure tacklers. If you can get them down to the ground, you can control the offense. If you can't get them down to the ground, you open up things in the pass game as well, and then you're in trouble. And it's just, it really just comes down to, do you tackle well in the run game? Because it's not like he's, bursting through and running clean for 50 yards all the time. It's just, do you take good angles? Are you gap sound? And when you can get your hands on him, can you get him down to the ground? Because if not, it might be a long day.
One of my notes here is with a couple of exclamation points. Arkansas stopping the run with 6 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were no longer stopping the run. And Tennessee went for 176 yards on 36 carries, 4.9 yards per carry, but it was Dylan Sampson, 140 yards on 22 carries, 6.4 yards per carry. None of those carries did he get stopped in the backfield. And so that's now the 3 games we've watched. He's had just 1 carry where he's been tackled for a loss. And I'm assuming Vanderbilt doesn't get him much in the backfield either, but Sampson. It's like he's a daily driver, like nothing flashy at times, but the guy has never lost a race at a green light. If you want to race him in town, good luck. He's going to beat you. And it's like, but that's like just a Ford Taurus. It's like, no. It's much more than just a Ford Taurus. And he's fun to watch because he's just really, really solid. And as I keep saying, this is an up-tempo, patient Tennessee offense. 36 rushes, 28 passes. So they know how to get this done. And I don't know what carry that was for Sampson that went for 53 yards and a touchdown, but they did a good job. Arkansas did a good job early on and containing him. But even then, it's still, 3, 4, 5 yards carried. I guarantee you Josh Heupel will take that against Ohio State and then just wait for the big one, because it's something that we always talk about with Michigan for the last 3 or 4 years doing the Michigan Monday podcast is Michigan is okay plotting because they know at some point there's going to be a 53-yarder, and there was a 53-yarder in this one. And if Ohio State can eliminate the 53-yarder on December 21st, then I like their chances. But also, we've seen them lose to Michigan a couple weeks ago without just giving up like a 27-yarder. That's all it took. Yeah. And Dylan Sampson is more than capable of doing that after carrying the ball 29 times. His 30th can go. And once he's in the open field, he's pretty darn fast too. I have not seen much of him this year until now. And I went back and looked. I'm like, where did this guy come from? And this is his junior year. He rushed for like 600 yards last year, and has just risen up the ranks of SEC royalty, essentially.
Yeah, he's really impressive. And you just look at his touchdown numbers. I mean, I compared on one of the earlier shows, I compared his numbers to Travion Henderson plus Quinjon Judkins, because Ohio State has really just treated those 2 guys as a split the job, kind of like a timeshare, like hot desking, Tony. You're swapping, you're just sharing the desk, and one of you guys is in at a time, and you put together the numbers, and it's like basically the same number of carries for those 2 guys compared to Sampson. Slightly more yards for the Ohio State duo, but like 6 more touchdowns for Sampson. He is an end zone magnet, and so you gotta get him down because he can find the end zone, and if he finds the end zone, that is not good for the defense. I did, Tony, want to talk real briefly. I always talk. New listeners may not know this, but I find 4th down decision making super interesting. And there was one right at the end in the fourth quarter. There's 6 minutes left. It's 4th and 3. They're at the plus 46. They've got a 14-13 lead, and they line up for it. And then they try to draw offsides, and then Arkansas doesn't bite, and then they punt, and then Arkansas goes down the field. And I get it. They had their backup quarterback in, and he at that point had not done anything to give you the impression that they were going to go down the field and score. But I have always wondered, you see teams go up and do that, and they're going to try and draw you offsides, and then, okay, there's 15 seconds on the play clock, and they didn't draw you offsides. And then they'll go up, and then they'll put someone in motion, and then they'll do another hard count, and then they'll back up with 3 seconds left and whatever, and it's like, well, we didn't get you. Good job. Why doesn't anyone ever do that, back up, puts it in motion, and then run the play? Like, I feel like I've seen that like twice in my life, and it feels like it almost certainly must work, because at that point, the defense is thinking, obviously, they're just trying to get us to jump. At that point, like, when are they more vulnerable to just plow the ball up the middle than when they're thinking, okay, whatever you do, don't jump off sides? Because then the offensive line, we talked earlier about when the offensive line doesn't have an advantage, then the offensive line does have an advantage, and you can potentially knock them back downfield. It was 4th and 3. This is, I think, the second time that we've seen him pass up an opportunity to potentially ice the game and have it come back to haunt them. And again, like, they're defensible decisions. It's like, I can tell what you were thinking with making that decision. I don't need to ask you in the post-game press conference. I know what you're thinking. It just feels like, boy, that's an opportunity. And that's not even necessarily specific to Tennessee or specific to this particular circumstance. That's more just someone should do that because it feels like it should work.
The worst part of that was at 3rd and 7, they ran the ball. And you're thinking, okay, they're doing this because it's 4-down territory, and they can, you can get 7 yards on 2 carries with Dylan Sampson. So they run the ball, they pick up 4 yards, and then they do that. I've been surprised, and I've said this before on these shows about Tennessee, I've been surprised with how unaggressive Josh Heupel is on 4th down. And he's not necessarily had the best opportunity to be aggressive. And what I'm saying is, like, 95% of the coaches, he's not had the opportunity to do what 95% of the coaches would do, right? He's had some opportunities to do what maybe 25% of coaches would do, and he's not doing it. He's not being aggressive. And I think this is one where it's 3rd and 7, you've got your quarterback, and so you run the ball thinking, like, to me, running the ball there and knowing that if you don't get your first, if you only get 4 yards, you're punting, to me, that speaks to maybe a lack of confidence in your quarterback. But again, this is game 5. So this is not the same Nico Iamaleava that will be like, he is no longer a redshirt freshman at this point. He is a full season starter at Tennessee. He's a veteran by now. And so that, they're, like you said, they're all defensible, and you know what's going on. But it is a little bit risk averse, and I'm not saying that's why they lost. This one shouldn't have been maybe as close as it was, but because Arkansas wasn't able to capitalize. But then at the end of the game, Tennessee wasn't able to capitalize either, and they had a couple of opportunities to do so and didn't. And you can chalk that up to a young quarterback, a head coach trying to get through this with a young quarterback, and I think all of that is, that's valid.
Yeah, and you understand all of that, and it's you got the backup in on the other side, and backup hadn't done anything at that point. What was interesting is next time they get the ball back with 4:06 left in the clock at their own 20. Again, 14-13 lead, 3 timeouts for Arkansas. You're at the point then where it's like 3 first downs wins the game, and they go 1-yard run for Dylan Sampson. And then Squirrel White was open on 2nd down, and Iamaleava just threw it low and incomplete. And that might have been the play where he got hurt and hit his head on the turf, I think. But then on 3rd and 9, they throw it again. They throw it into double coverage, and they burned all of 37 seconds of clock and 0 Arkansas timeouts. And it's like, boy, you're not doing things consistently. The only consistent thing was neither of these things really worked. That was kind of the only consistent thread there, where it was like, okay, we were probably too conservative that time. Now we're going to be too aggressive. And there are ways to call safer pass plays there. And, I get why it's, as you said, it's a young quarterback, and this was game, 5. So, he is not the same guy now. And some of these lessons are not necessarily going to port forward, directly from where they were in early October. But yeah, the game management there was a little weird. And then even the last drive, they felt like they were kind of mismanaging their timeout because they needed a touchdown. They didn't use their timeouts. They had, I think it was the long pass. It might have been the long pass to Dante Thornton. And then they get a first down. So then the clock stops. So it's like you can get up to the line and run a play. And they ran 13 seconds off the clock, even with the clock having stopped. And then they ran it inside with Dylan Sampson for a short gain, which, okay, I get it. I see you're thinking, you're trying to catch him off guard, but then you have to call a timeout, and then there's 12 seconds left in the game. And so you probably should have called the timeout earlier if you're going to run 13 seconds off the clock. But then on the next play, it's 12 seconds left. You have one timeout, and they had 3 receivers in the route, and only one of them was in the end zone. And it's like, you only have like 6 seconds left. Like, you probably need to take a shot into the end zone. And they never actually took a shot into the end zone, despite the fact they had the ball at the plus 25, something like that. And it's like, you're down by 5. A field goal doesn't do you any good. You have to, where the color of the field changes, you got to get the ball in there. That's where the grass stops being green. You need to get it in there. And so you have to throw the ball down there. You're not going to, Arkansas is sitting back and playing coverage. You're going to have to take a chance. Like, you're going to have to throw a ball that is potentially going to get picked off because you're not in a great situation. Everyone knows what you need to do, but then you have to do it. You can't throw, it wasn't even that, okay, well, we get a young quarterback and he wanted to be safe and he checked it down. Like, two of the routes were at like the 5-yard line. Like, that was just a bizarre choice to me.
I will say the rush was, that was the bobbled snap by Nico that Dylan Sampson kind of grabbed out of the air.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just trying to save your mentions there, Tom. But that completion to like the play to Dante Thornton, that came with like, that was snapped with like 46 seconds left. And the next snap comes at 22. And yeah, you gained 42 yards, but you should be moving a little bit quicker than that. And then Heupel was not happy with that botched snap because I'm sure that would have been the touchdown. That would have been the game winner. But yeah, like you couldn't get further than the 20. And then that last play where Nico Iamaleava runs it and has the brain fart, and I'm sure is still, he's in the playoffs now. So move past that and grow from that and never let it happen again. The last thing I have, Tom, is, well, other than the tight ends were effective again against Tennessee. That's one thing. We saw Georgia really get after them. And so that seems to be an area that can happen. I think this is the first game that we got to see Keenan Peely, who was their middle linebacker, who was then lost for the season a couple weeks after this game. And because to me, this is also the first time I'd really noticed Arion Carter, who is their starting weak side linebacker. And he had some ups and downs, but he also had quite a few ups in this one. And I'd been saying in the last show or the previous show, like, when are we going to notice the linebackers? And I think I noticed him more in this one. There's one play where he nearly had a safety, probably could have had a safety, but he couldn't bring the guy down in the end zone. And then a couple plays after that, he loses the running back in the flats, and it's a big pickup on third down or whatever. So it's like you see him, and then there's a miss or something in there. But overall, I thought he played well. Now, I wonder, is that because of Peely being in there, and you're more confident. The best linebacker is there, so you can just do your job, and you're going to be more comfortable. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, or this is just 3 random games, and this is the first time I really noticed him doing things. And coverage is still, I think, an issue for the linebackers for sure, and really didn't really notice the safeties much in this one, as that's kind of been up and down too. Andre Turntine, I don't know if he's just kind of like the last line of defense, and so he doesn't always get involved in plays, but he has not really stood out to me. He's missed some tackles. That's really what I'm seeing from him at times as we're looking for him. And, the first game we watched was Alabama. Will Brooks was like really, really good, and he's the strong safety. And since then, kind of been up and down as well for me.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. And Turntine has 35 tackles on the year, and he had a high of 4 against Florida, and his high in every other game is 2. Yeah. So he's not someone who runs up big stats. You don't notice him all that often, but he had a nice play in, I think, the last game we watched. The last thing that I had was the final drive of the game. I was amazed at how well Arkansas was able to run the ball because they had their backup quarterback in there, and he had a 13-yard pass on like just sort of a short throw and a decent run after the catch to start the drive, but then 24-yard run, 11-yard run, and then finally an 11-yard run where they let them score on the last one. But Arkansas running 74 plays, including 44 runs. We see this with Ohio State sometimes, where if the defense can't get off the field, it adds up over the course of the game. And Tennessee, I think, rotates more on defense than Ohio State does generally. But it felt like that might have been, Tennessee was defending the run reasonably well for most of the game. And at the end of the game, they were getting a whole shot through them. And I think they might have just kind of run out of gas at the end of the game, which even rotating guys as much as they do, you do have guys just run out of gas at some point. And I don't know what other explanation I would have really had there, because it wasn't like they really had to respect the pass because the quarterback had not shown any ability to throw the ball, but Tennessee was still able to run it. I just thought that was somewhat noteworthy at the end of that game.
And this was the first game that we've seen where the opponent has run the ball more than they've thrown it. Alabama and Georgia threw it much more, and Arkansas ran it 44 times to a 27 or 230 passes. But some of that may have also, I think, is because Taylon Green was injured, and so you're going to run the ball more with your backup quarterback. So, but still, it probably would have been a little bit closer to 50-50. But I think this shows that there are ways to be effective, and not the 3.1 yards per carry is effective, but when it's 11 yards per carry, Tom, on the final drive, then you'll take that. And they kind of wore Tennessee down there. And having a quarterback that can also run, as they did with Malachi Singleton, helps a little bit as well. So that's all I have. And you have anything less? I did also think it was interesting that there were times where Arkansas was still throwing against the light box. Like there's 6 guys in the box, and like, no, we're still going to throw it. And that was pretty early on. And I was like, why don't you run the ball when you have the numbers like that? And we'll see if Ohio State can, but again, that's up to the interior. That's up to the offensive line to handle those tackles. And we've seen Ohio State have some issues there of late.
And the only other thing I had, and you mentioned him earlier, James Pierce, number 27, defensive end. Just every game, I find myself going, oh, look, there he is again. Just there was a point in the Tennessee pass rush really wasn't getting the quarterback much in the first half, but Pierce had one where he just whipped the right tackle and got a big, I don't know if it was a sack or a big TFL early in the third quarter to kill a drive. And then in the fourth quarter, just came clean off the right edge and deflected a pass. And it was one of those where it went up in the air. You're going, oh, he's going to intercept this. And he didn't, but just very consistently, the defensive lineman that you notice the most on this Tennessee team. If you are an Ohio State fan and watching that game in a week and whatever it is, number 27, find where he is. Like normally the center is like, okay, there's the mic. You want to know where number 27 is on that Tennessee defense.
Yeah, 6'5", 243 listed out. You mentioned his number 27, Joshua Joseph's number 19. Their tackles are in the 20s too. So they're all, they're all thinking that they are Jared Lorenzen, I guess, is basically what they're doing there to keep it all in the SEC. So that will do it. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Hit the thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube before you go. And of course, you can find us on all of your podcast platforms. Just search Buckeye Weekly Podcast. And you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where you can sign up now. First month, just $4.99. Say hello to us there. We're talking Ohio State. We're talking Tennessee. We're talking the transfer portal and everything therein. So thank you all for tuning in. Again, as Tom said, hey, Vols fans, send this to your people and let them know that there's other content out there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.